Good morning, everybody. I'm Frank Spillers with Rural Community Solutions, where we help communities, businesses, and organizations create family-friendly, youth-centered places that attract people that they want to have live, work, and play there. So if you're an organization, you need volunteers, you need to create that environment for volunteers to participate, people that want to be there where they have an environment where they feel they belong. Same way with the business. If you are trying to attract employees right now, maybe it's not the employee's fault, it's your environment's fault. So it's not attracting the employee that wants to work there. So we're going to be talking today about relationships. We're going to be talking today about your responsibility to create those relationships. Waiting for somebody else to change is like doing the same things in the same way and expecting different results. It is insanity. Nobody is going to change out there. Where you need to change is in you. So relationships and communities, that's one of our foundational pillars of rural community solutions and how we create community prosperity. How we create prosperity in general is through relationships. Nothing happens without relationships. And the importance of that relationship is, how do you interact with people? How do you interact with your environment? And how do you interact with those around you to bring them and to create that environment where prosperity happens? Now, prosperity can be in all different forms. It can be money, it can be talent, it can be skills and ability, it can be feelings, emotions, whatever. That's all prosperity. How do you feel? How is your emotional state when you are around people? This is why, if you want to be successful, you surround yourself with people that are successful, because it'll help that emotion, it'll help that feeling within inside of you to be successful. So let's talk a little bit now about community relationships, because the relationships that you have within your community will create that environment that will help people be attracted to your community. Having an attitude and building relationships that are family friendly and youth centered will attract people that want to live in a community that's family friendly and youth centered. It doesn't happen any different. So if you are looking at recruiting retirees, you're not going to get family friendly youth centered people. You're not going to get those people that want youth, that want to bring their families, because that's not the environment that you set. So using those pillars of family-friendly, youth-centered places creates the relationship, and that's where that you want to go. Now, your relationship habits. Everybody has a relationship habit. You create relationships based upon how you saw relationships being created when you were in your youth. I'm going to explain that a little bit deeper, of how you became who you are and how you do what you do through what you saw when you were a youth. This is how you build community culture. Relationships in your community were built upon the community culture that you saw, say 25 years ago. What were you doing 25 years ago? What was happening 25 years ago in your community on relationship building to bring you to the point to where you are right now? So if you're a 30-year-old in a community, and you are born and raised in that community, think back to when you were 5 and you look around your community. What did you see? Who did you see, and what were they doing? What were your parents doing? What were your neighbors doing? How were they creating relationships? What were you doing within your church? What were you doing within the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts or any organization, 4-H organization? How were you creating those relationships? Because that's how you learned how to create relationships within your community. Now, if you're not aware of that, it becomes a subconscious way of acting within your subconscious thought. And it's just automatic now. So you are creating relationships the way you learned. So let me show you this just a little bit. And this is how you learn new things. You live within an environment, and your environment has a whole bunch of inputs. And your environment has everything, your perception of what you believe, your perception about your income, your perception about health, and your perception about relationships. That's all in your environment. And your environment then is absorbed through your five senses. What you feel, see, hear, smell, and taste. That all comes through your five senses of your environment. Your perception is your filtering mechanism of what you believe that comes through your five senses. If you accept it, it goes into your subconscious thought. Everything that you accept as true becomes your subconscious thought. And the more that you accept of your environment that is true, of what you see, feel, believe, and you see, feel, believe, and have emotions about, that comes into your subconscious, the more habits you have of what you believe is true, that creates your actions. Now, if something comes through your filtering mechanism from your environment by what you feel, see, hear, smell, and taste, that your belief system rejects, it doesn't become part of you. It doesn't become a habit. You reject that, so your actions are almost opposite of that. It does not go into your subconscious thought. It does not go into habits that you form because you reject that input. And so everything that you accept is based upon your perception of what you believe, and yet what you believe and your perception of it was created way long ago. Well, it depends upon how old you are, but in your youth, because that's the environment that you saw. All right. And so your actions then become your results. Everything that you do gets that result. And if it's the result that you like based upon your belief system, it then reinforces the belief that you have that goes back out into the environment, that then comes back into what you feel, see, hear, smell, and taste. And it's a cycle. It is a cycle of how you learn something. That's why you attract what you think. That's why you surround yourself with people that are successful if you want to be successful. You surround yourself with the people that you want to copy. All right. If you see traits in people that are what you want to be, if you see traits in people and how you want to act, what you want to learn. This is why apprenticeship programs are so valuable. It's because you are training somebody in those habits that you want them to work. So it's called even a work ethic. It's called even a relationship ethic. It's called how do we handle marriage? How do we keep marriages? But it's also how do we have those community relationships in our community based upon what we saw when we grew up. That's how we lead organizations. That's, the organization was led by my father. So I am now going to be the leader of that organization. This is how he led that organization. This is how I'm going to lead the organization. Or your mother was considered a leader in the community, and so people look at you as the next leader in the community because of what they saw in your mother. They think that just because your mother had these traits, you're going to have those traits too, and you will be the exact same type of leader as they are. And most generally, you would be, because you are copying that environment. So what happens, though, when voices get in the way? Now, the voices that you listen to the most are yours. But where did those voices come from? Those voices came from your past. So when you have voices that are talking about, they're funny, I sit still and don't move. Your family's on the wrong side of the tracks. You just aren't talented. You can't do that. It won't work. You can't do anything right. Why don't you be more like your brother? Or why don't you be more like your sister? Entrepreneurs hear this all the time. You need to have a real job. Nothing good ever happens to this family. You just aren't athletic. Some coaches say that to people. Rich people are snobs. You have to do it my way. Oh, no, you can't be a spaceman. I really feel sorry for your husband or your wife. Those are voices that we have heard in the past, and those are voices then that become a part of us in our subconscious thought when we try to do things, when we try to make new relationships in our community. Those voices happen within our past, and that then becomes our reality. Our reality of how systems should work, our reality of how we should work within our community. So what we really need to do to create better relationships in our community is think internally. Think about how you need to change. Don't think about how anybody else needs to change, because nothing out in the environment will change until you change within here. And that's relationships. How you view that relationship, how you view the actions of that relationship, all start internally with how you viewed relationships when you were young. So if you had good examples of relationships as you grew up, then you probably have great relationships now. If you had some poor examples of relationships when you grew up, then if you don't acknowledge those, if you don't learn from those, if you don't learn how to have different type of relationships, you can change it. This is not written in stone. This is how I'm going to be. This is, I am aware of how I am, and if I don't like it, I'm going to change. But you have to be aware of your actions in how you create relationships. How do you build those relationships? Both personal relationships, if you're married, if you have boyfriend, girlfriend, your significant other, how are you dealing with those relationships? If you're in your community, how do you deal with those relationships in your community? How do you accept other people's ideas? Do you just reject them, or do you embrace other people's ideas? It's based upon how you saw leaders and how you saw others creating those relationships when you were younger. Because as you grow up, when you're younger and you see things happening in your community, that becomes reality. That's your perception. That's your learned reality. That's your learned perception. And once you learn that, it becomes true. But that's not necessarily everybody's truth. It is yours only. And if it doesn't work, you have to change your truth. You have to change your perception of how you view the world. And how we view the world right now has to change, because the whole world has changed as we're coming out of COVID. This whole world has been changed. And now we have new things that we can adapt to. We can adapt to how do we open up our communities to include and welcome a brand new type of workforce. People working from home, people bringing their own jobs with them, people coming from the coast, people coming from metro areas that want to experience a rural lifestyle. Now, when we embrace them and we accept them into our community, we have to also accept their ideas and their way of life, their perception, their learned responses of what they learned about when they were young. And that's where engagement comes in, because then we start to listen to them, listening to them instead of telling them how to act. We listen to them based upon their values. When we build relationships and we listen to other people, we start to build a trust aspect, a unity of trust, and the foundation of trust in our communities. And when we can do that, we start to build very, very strong bonds of relationships that we can move forward. So think about what you learned when you were a child in relationships to relationships. What was your relationship like? What did you see in your home for relationships? How did your mentors, if you will, your teachers, if you will, have relationships with other people? How were your parents, if you had parents, how did they interact with each other? Significant others, how did they interact? How did they interact at the dinner table? How did they interact in an intimate way? How did they interact with their neighbors? How did they interact with their community? Because how they did that, you learned. And that is deep within you in your subconscious mind. And if you don't like what you feel, if you don't like what you see, you have to evaluate how that is and then choose to change how you are. So think about the community, think about the relationships that you have in the community, because this is one pillar that's really, really important for you. This is one pillar of how you can get along and create civility within your community. Because you don't have to agree with everybody. That's not building relationships. You don't have to like everybody. That's not building great relationships. Relationships are accepting people for who they are based upon your perception of how you can adapt who you are to get along with who they are. You don't have to like them. You don't have to agree with what they do, but you can be civil towards them. You can bring them in to build that relationship, to understand who they are, and to start building an environment of civility within your community. When we do that, we start to attract people that want to live in our community, that want to have a family-friendly, youth-centered place to raise their family and to start training their children on how to create great relationships. So build your environment that creates relationships, solid, beneficial relationships in your community. If you want to know more, let's talk. Give me an email at frank@ghorizons.com or kim@ghorizons.com, and let's start a conversation on how we can help you build better relationships in your community so you can attract family-friendly, youth-centered people that want to live in your place. So I'm Frank Spillers. This has been Rural Community Solutions. I hope you have a great rest of your week. We'll see you later. Have a great day. Bye-bye.